Welcome to the Monday edition of the program. Glad you are here, whether you're watching on the Salem News Channel, listening on the Salem Radio Network, or one of our great affiliates across the United States of America. Welcome. I'm going to take some phone calls today because of the Epstein files. So I want to give you my number early, 1-800-520-1234. President Trump surprised everyone by saying, go ahead, let him out. Let's get this over with. I got important stuff to focus on. And I talked about it on Fox this morning with Dana Perino and Bill Hemmer, and I'll come to that. So there will be phone calls on the Epstein files. I've told you everything already. There's not going to be anything new in there that we don't know. They can't release grand jury investigations, not going to touch on Donald Trump. Jeffrey Epstein had a Trump fixation. They haven't been friends for years. He is a criminal of the worst sort. I believe he killed himself. I believe people will be embarrassed unnecessarily. Their names will show up in these files because they've been mentioned by Epstein or someone, and the lunatic fringe on the web will use that to amplify them. Knowing full well that I have no connection whatsoever, never having been to Palm Beach or ever met Jeffrey Epstein, I'm very confident my name will not appear in the files, but I do feel bad for the people who are going to get swept up in this. And it's just, I guess, what that Democrats have to do to divert from the fact that Donald Trump is off to an extraordinary start on the world stage in his second term. I think that's what it comes down to. I think Trump's just had it and said, let it out. Let's get back to talking about important things. Now, I do want to begin by pointing out the market's having a really bad day. Now, I don't give financial advice, but I do give financial data. And the Dow is down 1 1/3 points. The S&P is down 1 1/3 points. The NASDAQ is down 1 1/3 points. The Russell 2000 is down almost 2%. So that's the kind of sell-off that my friend David Bahnsen wrote about on Saturday, or talked about in the Wall Street Journal on Saturday. And I wanted to point out, on Saturday morning, I got up, I read the Journal, and I read in that, out of nowhere, David Bahnsen, who's a friend of the program. You've heard him on a lot. David is not a client of mine, nor am I a client of his. He's just been a friend of mine for 30 years, and I think he's a very savvy investment counselor. And David Bahnsen is a well-respected name in the world of finance. And so the Wall Street Journal quoted him on Saturday morning, and I quoted him saying about the big market moves last week, where they had a really bad week in the markets last week. And I finally got out. I said, I want nothing. I own no equities at all right now. I'm just sitting in cash. I got out, over the course of the last 2 weeks, and I finally sold my last position in Palantir last week because I think everything's kind of weird in the markets right now. And so this is confirmation bias. When David Bahnsen says on Saturday something that confirms what I did on Friday and Thursday and the last 2 weeks, which was get liquid, I feel good about that. That's just confirmation bias. But what he said, I wanted to share with you. This has happened a couple of times, but the buyers have come back, said David Bahnsen. At some point, they won't come back. Investors like Bahnsen, the journal continued, who are skeptical of Silicon Valley's spending spree, believe that a top-heavy market reliant on periodic moments of dip buying is bound to tip over. I don't know that this is the moment, Bahnsen said, but I do know that the moment is overdue and inevitable. What's he mean by that? He means that there is going to be a correction, all right? And by that, I would mean a 20% sell-off in the value of equities. So I then went and got David Bahnsen's most recent podcast, The Dividend Cafe, and at the end of it, he always puts in a very handy transcript of his podcast. He writes, conclusion, I believe AI is in a bubble, and I believe it will be the most important technology of this century. I do not believe those two things are a contradiction. I believe the historical pattern of a bubble, then a crash, then a normalization will play out here as it has in all sorts of transformative eras that morphed into a mania. I believe the above sentence applies to the AI-specific story and not the entire market, as was the case with the NASDAQ tech crash of 2000. And I believe that those who experience their first tragic moment as an investor in this AI moment will learn from it and become a better investor in the future because of it. But to the extent it is up to us at the Bahnsen Group, that's his firm, we prefer people to avoid the pain to begin with. To that end, we work. So it may very well be that we're in for a really rough market time. That will not be because of anything Donald Trump has done. I just put it on the record on this day, which is November 17th, 2025. If we have a big correction, Donald Trump will get blamed. It's got nothing to do with Donald Trump. Markets don't have much to do with the president. Interest rates don't have much to do with the president. But markets do get into a bubble. Bubbles can deflate rapidly. They can bring down other assets. I hope David Bahnsen is right and says it's not going to extend to the entire market. But the AI bubble, I do believe that's real. We'll play a little bit more of that later in the program. Now I want to play for you the president on the tarmac last night in Florida. First of all, on affordability cut number 3.
The Biden administration did to our country should never be forgotten. And the single worst thing they did is allow 20 or 25 million people to pour into our country. People from prisons, drug dealers, mental institutions, bad people, gang members, to allow that to happen to the United States, totally unchecked and unvetted, should never be forgotten. What they've done to our country is a very big thing. But we are correcting it. We have strong borders now. We have a great economy. The prices are coming down. The Democrats like to use the word affordability, but their affordability was terrible. The problem with the Democrats, they lie. They do it so well. They talk about affordability, but I'm the one that's getting the prices down. As an example, they had the highest inflation in the history of our country. I have it down now to a normal level, and it's going down further. Thank you very much, everybody.
He also had this to say about affordability on the tarmac last night. Cut number 7.
Much better with this. And again, I go to Walmart and other companies, and in every case, it's about 25% that a meal, a Thanksgiving meal and surroundings are 25% lower than it was under the Biden administration. That's a big fact. And that comes from Walmart and others that do that.
So I don't do the shopping for Thanksgiving, but I happen to believe that everyone who does has noticed that prices are down because energy is down and there's always a tail effect. I'll talk with Bethany Mandel after the break about that. Let me begin the program with my relief factor because, boy, do I need it today. Baptism day yesterday. My youngest grandchild got baptized yesterday, and the 1-year-old spent the weekend with the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I, and that meant quite a lot. And she's mobile but not walking. And so I did a lot of up, down, touch the town, puts me in the mood. A lot of baby lifting. That, of course, I got my 3 miles in today before I had a lot of things to do this morning. So it was only 3 miles, but it was a good 3 miles. But that does throw everything into whack, especially my lower back. So time for relief factor twice today again. Icarian curcumin, resveratrol, omega. I take it every day. And as a result, I'm not really in bad way. I'm not the way my back was a couple of weeks ago. But you do that enough on a weekend with a 1-year-old, and it'll tell. It'll tell. So you ought to do what I do. Whenever you have one of those tells and your back starts to hurt or your muscle, anything, you've done something unusual. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. Or go get the starter pack for $19.95 at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. I also want to tell you about my friend Jan Janura. You know Jan. He's been on this program many, many, many times because he's a very dear friend of mine, and I think he's changed thousands of lives for the better. Jan started the wild adventure, TWA.US, perfect Christmas present for your husband, ladies. Just saying, perfect Christmas present, TWA.US. But he wrote a book, Turning Small Talk into Big Talk. You can get Turning Small Talk into Big Talk at Amazon, at Barnes & Nobles, on any place that sells books, or you can get it at jansbooks.com. It's a Publisher's Weekly bestseller. It was an Amazon staff choice. It's a fabulous book. We're 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving, less than 2 weeks away. Time to get this book drop shipped to you overnight so you can be prepared to have maybe the best Thanksgiving ever by learning how to talk to people about questions that really matter in their lives without getting into fights or arguments, but actually finding out interesting stuff. Turning Small Talk into Big Talk is the name of the book by Jan, J-A-N, Janura, Janura, or just go to jansbooks.com, jansbooks.com. You will thank me. You'll like, especially the preface, which I wrote for Jan. He's a dear, dear friend, and you're going to love the book. jansbooks.com. I hope you're a praying person. Say a prayer for the quick recovery of Bernie Kosar, legendary Cleveland Browns quarterback. He is out of surgery, had a liver transplant today, and people all over Cleveland love Bernie. People all over Boardman love Bernie. People all over Trumbull and Mahoning County love Bernie. And say a prayer for him. It's not an easy surgery. I had a friend who had liver transplant, and he told me, though it saved his life, he wasn't sure he'd do it again because it hurt so much. But I bet you that the surgery has improved dramatically in the years since then. I thought we had Bethany today, but we don't. So I want to go back to President Trump last night on the tarmac. Here is the president talking about hitting the Venezuelan cartel boats, cut number 4.
Venezuela, are you discussing options with Congress? Are you going to Congress to discuss potential options?
We like to keep Congress involved. I mean, we're stopping drug dealers and drugs from coming into our country. And I actually told Marco and some of the people, our Secretary of State is doing a great job, by the way. I said, go to Congress and let them know we're not letting drugs come through Mexico. We're not letting them come through Venezuela. And let Congress know about it. We don't have to get their approval, but I think letting them know is good. The only thing I don't want them to do is leak information that's very important and confidential and may put our military at risk, or whoever is doing, CIA, military, etc. But I did say, I said, go and see Congress, see the representatives that we're supposed to be seeing, and be open about it. If they say, we don't want you to stop drugs from coming into the country, I don't think that would be good, yes.
Are any other countries committed to helping the U.S. with Venezuela, or is all our action still?
Yeah, we have great support because it's all about drugs. Well, in Venezuela's case, it's about drugs, and it's also about thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that they've released into our country. And some are gang members from Tren de Aragua. Some are many are drug dealers. Some are murderers. So in the case of Venezuela, it's the prison population. Their almost entire prison population was released into the United States. You know what that means?
I don't think he's happy. I think he's making his point. Now, the vice president, J.D. Vance, went on with Margaret Brennan yesterday, the Bobo doll of the Republican Party. And J.D. Vance said this about Nick Fuentes, a racist lunatic. Cut number 8.
In your own movement, that's what I want to ask about, because one of the supremacists who was saying things like this about your family.
Yeah.
Nick Fuentes, an avowed anti-Semite,
sure,
went after your wife. He had previously dined at Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump. Does this have any room in your movement, in the MAGA movement?
Of course it doesn't have any room in the MAGA movement, and of course...
You disavow him and this.
And of course Donald Trump has criticized this person. Look, I think the guy's a total loser. Certainly I disavow him, but if you ask me what I care more about, is it a person attacking me personally, or is it government policy that discriminates based on race? That's what I really worry about.
Good for, Margaret Brennan puts on her earnest face, her sad face, her concerned face, and asks a question that's been asked and answered 10 times. I used to have Margaret on this show. I don't know what happened to her. I really do not know what happened to her. But that was really dumb. And, of course, he's going to disavow him and condemn him. But what I like about the vice president is that he says the obvious. Yes, he's a loser, and he's a racist. He's an anti-Semite, and he's attacked his wife, and everybody knows that. There's no question there. She doesn't want to talk about the use of race to inflict penalties or award benefits because that's unconstitutional. and J.D. Vance wants to talk about that. So bravo, Mr. Vice President. Now, let's go to Graham Plantner. He's the new darling of the lunatic left. He wants to be the nominee to run against Susan Collins, and he was on a Maine Senate fundraising event last night, cut number 10.
We're going to have to start treating the Supreme Court like the political action wing that it has become of conservatism. It is not functioning as a constitutional body.
Impeachment.
And it's very frustrating for me that there are, I think there are Democrats in the Senate that either do not understand or don't want to understand the power they actually have. And there is the Senate, if we retake the Senate, get the majority, fingers crossed, we need to use every single lever of power that we have to deal with the Supreme Court. And I think that a lot of that's going to be an ethics oversight. I'm a supporter of stacking the court. I'm also a supporter.
I'm a supporter of packing the court. James Carville on Fox News yesterday, cut number 11.
James, President Biden didn't do that. He said, look, I'm not going to pack the Supreme Court. But you're saying a future Democratic president will?
Well, they should, because the public has lost faith in the entire branch of government. I mean, this is the lowest the Supreme Court has been rated. And if you believe, as I do, that we need faith in not just the executive or the congressional branch of government, but the Supreme Court. And it is not written anywhere in the Constitution you have to have 9. That's just a number they came up with. I think they went from 7 to 9, but I'm not sure. And I think the way to cure that very quickly is expand it to 13 and get some balance on the court. You know, the Republicans won the popular vote, I think, 2 out of the last 8 elections, and they have 2/3 of the Supreme Court justices. They have 6 out of 9. And that's absurd. It's a distortion. The Supreme Court does not serve the law. It serves the interests of the Republican Party and corporate America, and everybody knows that.
Now, James Carville and I have known each other for a long time, and his wife Mary and I have been friends for a long time, and that's absurd, and James knows it's absurd. The Supreme Court is not a servant of the Republican Party or corporate interests. It is a servant of the Constitution. It does a very fine job. I believe there's a good argument that it's unconstitutional to raise the number of justices above 9. The most it's ever been is 10, and it was 10 and allowed to, and then returned to 9 concurrent with the passage of the 14th Amendment that guarantees the due process of law. The antithesis of the due process of law is changing the number of justices to change the result from the court. It is a profoundly destructive of the republic action. It's what the left wing wants to do because they want to get rid of the Constitution. They do not like the Electoral College. They don't like the Senate. They want direct elections of everyone and referenda on everything. And it's not what an anti-majoritarian free republic depends upon. And we ought not to give in to it. And I'm really amazed that they're being this explicit about it. But they are. Let me tell you about BestHotGrill.com. BestHotGrill.com makes the best grills in America, and they're made by my friends Irene and Rhett Rasmussen. And if you go to BestHotGrill.com right now, you're going to find right there the very best gifts that you could possibly give to your best clients this Christmas season. Go get the hibachi for your best 10 clients. It's so worth it. You might buy yourself the big Best Hot Grill. Solaire Infrared Grill is a wonderful thing. Or you might buy yourself the Rasmussen Popular Fireballs. You might get Rasmussen Gas Log Set or the Fireballs. But if you're buying gifts for clients, go to BestHotGrill.com and look at the little one or the next one and say, you know, if I give this to A, B, C, D, whatever my best clients are, they're never not going to remember me and they're never not going to thank me for giving them BestHotGrill.com. Solaire Infrared, BestHotGrill.com. I was on with Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino this morning. We covered a lot of ground, Epstein and back in the court. Let's just play the full segment, cut number 2.
And more on this with Fox News contributor Hugh Hewitt. Let me just read to you from Trump's Truth Social post on Epstein.
House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files because we have nothing to hide, and it's time to move on from this Democrat hoax perpetrated by radical left lunatics in order to deflect from the great success of the Republican Party. I think this falls into the category of what I used to call you need to be for what's going to happen. This vote was going to happen, and it looked like he was going to lose 40 Republicans, so now he's for it.
It is better, good morning, Dana. It is better to be playing offense than defense. It is better to declare, finally, I don't care, put everything out that you can put out. Now, you can't put out grand jury material. There are reasons for that. But the president is showing he's not afraid of it. And given everything that was leaked over the last 2 weeks and nothing laid a glove on him, I think he's doing the right thing by saying, be in favor of what's going to happen, as you noted, and just say, I don't care. So I think the president made a good choice here.
Hugh, game this out then. If the House goes forward, at what point would the American public be able to see all these emails?
I think the moment that the House spreads them around the House, they'll begin to leak. And when they begin to leak, we'll begin to see more emails with a lot of people who will suffer unfair association with Jeffrey Epstein because they didn't know that he was a pedophile and a creep and a criminal, and they had an email exchange with him. That's very unfortunate. It makes a lot of people look guilty. But I think it'll be almost instantaneous upon the release of the file that people who are not supposed to leak things will leak whatever they think might hurt or help their friends or foes, respectively.
Yeah, I wonder if there'd be redactions. Remember what the president said a while ago? He said there are a lot of innocent people going to be caught up in this.
Yeah.
Just by implication,
that's why grand jury.
Guilty.
Yeah, grand jury stuff is never let go. And in fact, full field background investigations that the FBI does before they are sent up to the Senate for confirmation. You never turn those loose because people say crazy stuff all the time. They have vendettas. They make stuff up. And we're going to get a lot of that, and a lot of people are going to get dirty as a response. But as a result, the president said, I've had it. I've got nothing to do with this guy. Let the chips fall.
Okay, on another topic, Hugh, since the 2025 election just a couple of weeks ago, a lot of things are now in motion for 2026 and 2028 even. And James Carville is basically saying that the Democrats, should they win in 2026, they should pack the court. Watch here.
I mean, this is the lowest the Supreme Court has been rated. And if you believe, as I do, that we need faith in not just the executive or the congressional branch of government, but the Supreme Court. And it is not written anywhere in the Constitution you have to have 9. The Supreme Court does not serve the law. It serves the interests of the Republican Party and corporate America, and everybody knows that. And I think it would be a good idea to return some balance to it. I really do.
You know, folks like that used to be against such radical ideas, but now, Hugh, is it becoming mainstream for Democrats to think this is a good idea?
I'm very shocked by that. James Carville is a very smart guy. He knows that packing the court would be the end of the rule of law in America. It's been at 9 since 1868. There's a good argument, in fact, that the 14th Amendment would not allow a bill to expand it. They were passed concurrently, but in the same period of time. The most it's ever been is 10. The moment you start packing the court to get a result that you want is the moment that we no longer have rule of law in the United States. Right. And that's very troubling to hear a guy as smart as James Carville say something as wildly irresponsible for the best interest of the country as that.
But he went further than that with Kayleigh's interview. He talked about D.C. and Puerto Rico. I mean, this has been debated back and forth as a foolish game, but Carville's taking it seriously. Last comment on that, Hugh.
I think a lot of the Democratic Party is reacting to the rise of the DSA and the municipal Marxists in both New York City and Seattle, and they're trying to remain relevant by explaining that they're just as radical as any radical out there, but they're not. They're mainstream, old-line, center-left Democrats who ought to hang on to their party and not let it get captured by the ideological extremes. Right now, it looks to me like a replay of 1972, way back when George McGovern took over the Democratic Party and took it over the left cliff in 1972. That's what I think I'm seeing with my friends in the Democratic Party who've lost control of their party to left-wing lunatics that are very young. It is a complete loss of control, and they're panicked. So you have old guys like James Carville. He's older than I am by a lot. And he's out there saying, yeah, let's pack the Supreme Court and make new states. They've lost the argument, so they want to change the rules. They want to basically repeal the Constitution. And understand, packing the Supreme Court is repealing the Constitution. We have an anti-majoritarian highest law that protects individual liberty. And when we begin to move away from that because we're frustrated by the pace, the fact that we can't get a majority to agree with us, much less a supermajority, then you're turning over to left-wing revolutionaries the right to run the country. And it's not going to work for New York. It's not going to work for Seattle. It ought not to be passing the lips of serious people like Carville. I mean, he's always been funny and wild, but he's never been crazy, and that's just lunatics. Joined by Ambassador Michael Oren. Dr. Oren, renowned historian, former member of parliament, also longtime ambassador of Israel to the United States, is the perfect guest today because a topic on the top of the list of topics Israelis are talking about is whether or not to have a commission into the failure of 10/7. Like the United States after John F. Kennedy's assassination in 9/11, Israel likes to set up special commissions. They do it more than we do. I think they've done it 20 times. Dr. Oren, would you explain when Israel decides to do this, how they do it, and why there is a current controversy about a commission over 10/7?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Lou. An easy question. Okay, I'm going to give you the simplest answer I can possibly give you. Okay, ready? It's this. In the past, state commissions have been led by Supreme Court justices, particularly by the president of the Supreme Court. That was the case after the 1973 Yom Kippur War. A judge, an American-Israeli judge, Agranat, reviewed that war. There was a war after. There was a commission after the 2006 Second Lebanon War, led by another Supreme Court judge, Weingrod. And now there should be a state commission to investigate the egregious failures of October 7th. But the prime minister is objecting to it. He's objecting because he claims that the Supreme Court cannot be objective. The Supreme Court is heavily weighted in favor of, say, the left, he claims. And there are a number of people behind the prime minister in the public who agree with him. He claims that 50% of the population is against having a state commission. So he wants to appoint a political commission. And the other half of the country says, no, that won't do. There has to be an independent judicial review. So that's where we stand. And it cuts deeply, deeply through the Israeli politic. It cuts all these fault lines I've talked about repeatedly on this program between religious and secular, ethnic differences between Jews from Eastern background, Jews from Western background, religious and secular, socioeconomic differences, the working class versus the elite. And there you have it. We've been following this question about the Prosecutor General of the Army leaking this video. Remember the last time we spoke about this? It's the same problem over and over again. These are our fault lines. You have black and white. You have state and federal power versus the individual liberties. These are our fault lines.
Well, Dr. Oren, engage with me a little bit on, I have no standing. I'm not an Israeli, but I am a lawyer and I know what conflicts of interest are. The Israeli Supreme Court was at the heart of the debate prior to 10/7, and many people allege that the eye was off the ball on the southern border with Gaza because of the debate and the argument over the power that the Supreme Court had aggregated to itself. So they are themselves part of this inquiry. So to me, as an American lawyer and a law professor, I think they can't be involved in this because they're part of the story. There's a conflict there. Does anyone make that argument? Because I've got no dog in this fight. It just seems to me obvious that the Supreme Court would have a conflict in assessing whether or not their actions over 20 years had led to polarization in Israel that led to eyes being off the ball.
This is precisely the prime minister's argument, that it can't be objective. The Supreme Court cannot be objective. And keep in mind, there's another fault line that's emerging in Israeli society that never existed before, and that's between the elected echelon, the political echelon, and the military. Netanyahu is saying, he was warned about a danger to Israel, but he was thinking the army was telling him the danger was not in the south, the danger was in the north with Hezbollah and Iran, and no one was talking about Hamas. So the prime minister says it's basically the army's fault, or the security apparatus, including the Shin Bet, the Mossad. It's all their fault, not his fault. And this is another dividing line. So you could have an independent commission that's not headed by a Supreme Court judge, but it is an independent commission not chosen by the government. You could take that step further and say, okay, not the Supreme Court, but some other jurists, some other prominent figures within Israeli society that are representative of the entire society, say religious and secular, left and right, rich and poor, if you will. So you could do that also. But it's going to be a huge dividing line in this country. In a way, Netanyahu kind of likes that. He likes the politics of division. He's less comfortable with an issue like the ultra-Orthodox service in the military, which cuts across right and left, religious and secular. So he's going to go very, very strong on this, but it's not going to go away.
Now, if you were king of the forest, not queen, not duke, not earl, you're pretty fair-minded, and over the years, you said things like, Supreme Court's out of whack, but we don't want this result. You're a very center person. What would you do? Who would you put on this, and how big would you make it, and what would you charge it to do?
I would charge you. I'd find that important people from the field of philosophy. Professor Asa Kasher, who is the author of our IDF Code of Ethics. You know, every Israeli soldier carries a laminated card in his left pocket of his fatigues that has that Code of Ethics. It's authored by a professor from Hebrew University. It could be philosophers like Mika Goodman, a wonderful philosopher from the Hartman Institute. It could come from different segments of Israeli society. It needn't be a jurist on the high court. I think that any commission appointed by the government is already going to be impugned by a large segment of Israeli society. And this is a time for healing. This is an essential episode in Israel's development. We have to move beyond October 7th. The only way we can do this is through an independent commission.
So should the prime minister, in Michael Oren's view, appoint someone above reproach and tell them to appoint 7 or 8 other people to work with them and then give them unlimited funds? Is that a way forward?
That would be a way forward. That would be a way forward. It's interesting, you know, going back to 1973, the Agronaut Commission faulted the army and not the political echelon, that the army had not warned the political echelon. Golda Meir was the prime minister, defense minister, Moshe Dayan, pretty much got off the hook from the Agronaut Commission. And it was really the army and certainly the chief of staff at the time, Dado Elazar, who was forced to resign. But the Israeli populace came back and gave its vote. It didn't accept the Agronaut Commission and voted Golda Meir out of office.
Well, however they vote, that will be their vote. But to me, that whole, and we talked about it long before 10-7, the Supreme Court is part of the story. They cannot be the appointing authority if under any standard of the appearance of impropriety. Michael Oren, always a pleasure, Ambassador. Follow him on X at Dr. Michael Oren. He's got a great Substack as well. Clarity. Boy, do they need a lot of clarity in Israel about this commission. Potential to do a lot of good, potential to do a lot of damage. One of our great sponsors is Americans for a Balanced Budget. They have a website, StopHealthCostHikes.com. StopHealthCostHikes.com. One of their issues is who ought to get a tax credit for Obamacare premiums. President Trump was on the tarmac last night talking about, there are a lot of issues that have to be resolved about. Obamacare has comprehensively failed, and it's failed some people so extraordinarily that unless they get some help, they're not going to have any insurance at all. President Trump threw out one idea last night, cut number 6.
Yeah, we're negotiating with lawmakers, and I've had personal talks with some Democrats. I can't tell you who they are. I just don't want to do that. It's not fair to them. About paying large amounts of dollars back to the people. You know, this was my idea. It came up during that. You know, oftentimes under times of stress, like the shutdown, you come up with great ideas that you wouldn't have thought of before. The insurance companies are making a fortune. Their stock is up over 1,000% over a short period of time. They are taking in hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're not really putting it back, certainly not like they should. So when I see this, and when I've seen this over the last pretty short period of time, I said, why do we just pay this money directly to the people of our country and let them buy their own
directly to the people of the country? Now, what you'll find for Americans for a Balanced Budget, StopHealthCostHikes.com, is not the same thing, but not that different. They want to target tax credits for the cost of insurance. Now, a tax credit is a dollar for dollar, and that is, in essence, like writing someone a check. Now, who's going to get the check? I'm not. I'm on Medicare. Right? I'm over 65. I was on with Chapter today, Chapter is the best Medicare services advisor in the United States. They used to advertise on the show. They don't now, but they use big data, and they're fabulous. So I asked Chapter.com, and they're working out what our best Plan G is and what our best Plan D is and all these different crazy stuff. It's all big data. Well, you don't have to really spend a lot of time figuring out. It would be better to give money directly to people than to subsidize insurance companies. Tax credits for what you pay for insurance make a lot of sense. So head over to our sponsor, Americans for Balanced Budget website, stophealthcosthikes.com. Stophealthcosthikes.com. And get in the game, because once you're past 65, you're out of the game. You're covered by Medicare. And so Medicare is expensive. It's ridiculously complicated. That's why AskChapter.com exists. But that's neither here nor there. Most people are still in the game of having to figure out how to get health insurance in the United States, or whether or not they should have an HSA or whatever. Go get some good ideas on how to keep the costs down. StopHealthCostHikes.com. Boy, it feels a lot like 2008. And by that I mean, I don't like big market swings, and I don't like days like today. It wasn't like a disastrous day. Smith Barney didn't go under, or we didn't have a big company capsize, but the Dow was down 1.18%, and the S&P 500 was down 0.92%, and the NASDAQ was off 0.84%. NVIDIA was down 2.5%, Palantir was down 1.6%, and I'm not exposed. I'm just in cash waiting to see what happens, because I got nervous. And 3-4 weeks ago, John Campbell got nervous 3-4 months ago. Then I got nervous. Then I heard David Bahnsen of the Bahnsen Group record his Dividend Cafe. I saw him quoted in the Wall Street Journal on Saturday, and I went and got the Dividend Cafe, his great podcast, and I downloaded it. And I don't have his permission to do this, but I sent him a note saying, I don't think you'll object. Tell me and I'll stop if you want me to. But I want you to hear a little bit of what he had to say that is warning the market about the AI bubble. Cut number 12, David Bahnsen on the Dividend Cafe podcast this weekend.
I want to make the case to you all that this AI story is a bubble, that there is a bubble going on that is going to do great damage to certain investors, and that at the same time, I do not mean by that what I think a lot of people might mean. I'm not suggesting a systemic market collapse. I am not suggesting a particular time or season to exit. I am not suggesting that AI will prove to be a dud of technological innovation. I believe it is entirely consistent and, in fact, more cogent to understand the legitimacy of artificial intelligence, the opportunity that exists in AI as it unfolds in a more monetizable way to real-life businesses in the future than is available now, and at the same time understand that when you get into a moment where euphoria is driving investor returns and expectations, that there becomes a moment in which it is very difficult to make money in that as an investor. Now, there are always fads. There are always noisy things. And I have talked in the past about shiny objects, where people get a little theme or narrative and they go pile into it and eventually get their face ripped off. And if we were just talking about another one of those things, then I probably wouldn't devote as much Dividend Cafe time and space as I have this year, and will continue to. We did a Dividend Cafe about a month ago now, where I tried to unpack why I found it utterly insane. I mean, intellectually, but also morally insane. For an investor, let alone an investment professional like myself and my colleagues at the Bahnsen Group, to change our belief system based on a particular moment in time, to say, well, we actually want to put a pause on what our principles are so that we can try to extract a certain opportunity for a season, and then we'll jump out before things get a little hairy. I did not decide to write on this subject this week as NVIDIA has now gone down over 10% from its high of just a couple weeks ago, and other AI darlings like Palantir down over 15%. I wanted to write about this more extensively a month ago when I first wrote in defense of our principles, and then the next week wrote a sort of contrarian position about what AI will end up doing to jobs in the society. It had more of a cultural bend to it. But right now I want to write about math. I want to write for investors in a very practical way. Because if this were just noise and some people are going to get a little carried away, it doesn't matter very much to a lot of people, and it wouldn't matter very much at all to our clients, who are, of course, the primary audience of Dividend Cafe. But the reason why I believe this is more than noise is I think that we're now talking about a legitimate bubble where there is significant dollars involved, that if almost every bearish thing, every negative thing, every concerning thing does not happen, it may still be very, very difficult for investors to make money because of the math of the gyrations, the high volatility of how a lot of these things are going. I'm going to make that case for you.
No, this whole podcast is 45 minutes, and I was just transfixed by it. Now, again, I don't have any exposure. I'm not giving any investment advice, but I find an expert like Dr. Oren on commissions of inquiry. Senator Cotton coming up. We're going to talk about the Caribbean. I think David Bahnsen is an expert on investing, and I'm not his client, and he's not my client, and so I just respect him. Cut number 13 from the Dividend Cafe on AI.
But I will not bury the lead. I've stated I believe AI is in a bubble, but the risk is not to me in what AI does. It's not when it does it, but rather that there is a moment in our investing culture taking place that I've seen several times in my adult professional life, that a sense of sensibility is replaced with euphoria, and the decision-making that results is never, ever good. The stakes are higher because of the dollars, and I think that what a lot of people believe is, well, if I avoid owning the pets.coms of this moment, you know, that was a situation where people bought terrible companies. They went down 100%. And there were people who lost all that money and they moved on. And I don't think there are very many people that put 100% of their portfolio in pets.com. Maybe some did. They probably didn't have a very big portfolio if they did. But they touched the stove, and those people are not going to be touching the stove again, Lord willing. However, I don't think that's what we're talking about. The low quality nature of some of the companies at the heart of the dot-com implosion and bubble make this story worse. It is not better because they are higher quality businesses involved right now. It is giving a false sense of security that I think is covering up for some of the real mathematical fundamentals at play. Let me just start with what I mean by some of the mathematical fundamentals. And it doesn't require you to have an outlook on AI. It doesn't require you to have a particular opinion or point of view on a given company. It just requires you to understand how math works in terms of percentages. NVIDIA was $212 on October 19th. And as of today, it was sitting, somewhere in the 175 range. It's lost $500 billion of market cap. But as a percentage, that's only about 10%. And it can add 500 billion in a minute. It can add $1 trillion. It can take away $2 trillion. It releases earnings results next week. And so you can expect there could be big volatility up or down around whatever happens. But that's the thing about the absurdity of when companies are at 50 to 60 times earnings, and we're talking about trillions of dollars as if it's normal. Okay. The fact of the matter is that a company losing $500 billion of market cap in 15 days is not normal, nor is a company adding $2 trillion in market cap in 10 months, which is what NVIDIA had done before the last 10 days. that came after it added $1.5 trillion of market cap in the year before. All right, these are absolutely unprecedented moves of valuation in absolutely unprecedented periods of.
That is a word of caution. I'll play more of it in a little bit. I want to give you a different word of caution having to do with your vulnerability online that is brought to you by a sponsor. Now, David Bahnsen's not a sponsor. NVIDIA is not a sponsor. No, I have no financial products. I don't do that. I have a sponsor that is webroot.com/Hewitt. That is protection for your online doings. If you've got a cell phone, if you've got a computer, if you've got an iPad, you've got exposure to bad actors online. And what you need is protection. Webroot Total Protection is the most comprehensive protection about which I'm aware. Webroot.com/Hewitt. Right now, to get you in the door, they're offering 60% off. The individual plan is 1 identity and 5 devices. The family plan is 10 identities and 10 devices. And we're not assuming everyone has their own device, but some people might. About up to 10 people and 60% off. What do they stop? They stop you from malicious sites before you visit them. They have a system optimizer. They've got a firewall, real-time antivirus. The identity protects you up to $1 million in fraud losses. You really need cybersecurity identity protection, and you get it from webroot.com/Hewitt. 60% off right now for Webroot Total Protection. Webroot.com/Hewitt.
Insurance.
Is it time for Congress to move legislation that puts pressure on Russia and puts pressure on Putin?
Well, I hear they're doing that, and that's okay with me. They're passing legislation, or the Republicans are putting in legislation that very tough. It's sanctioning, et cetera, on any country doing business with Russia. They may add Iran to that, as you know. I suggested it. So any country that does business with Russia will be very severely sanctioned. We may add Iran to the formula, yeah. Mr. President.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That was President Trump last night on the tarmac in Florida. I'm joined by United States Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Senator Cotton is chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He's on the Armed Services Committee, and he is chairman of the Republican Senate Conference, making him the third-ranking Republican in the Senate. Good Monday, Senator Cotton. I'm unaware of where the sanctions legislation is. Does the president have that right that it's getting put in by the senator, by the Republicans, and it's likely to pass?
Yeah, Hugh, I had heard what the president said yesterday, too, and that was consistent with what I had heard from some of the senators who are leading the charge in that legislation. Last I checked, it has more than 80 sponsors, and I think mostly we wanted the president to say that he's ready to impose those sanctions, that he thinks it's necessary to force Putin's hand further to the negotiating table in Ukraine. So if the president is ready for that, then I suspect we can pass that in short order in the Senate and then move out quickly with it in the House of Representatives as well. I've long thought that the only way to have peace in Ukraine, given where things stand on the battlefield, regrettably, after nearly 4 years of war, thanks to Joe Biden's weakness, is that you're going to have to keep pressure on Vladimir Putin, keep the pressure on the forward line of troops, keep the pressure on his economy to make him realize he has more to lose if the war continues than he does if he sits down at the negotiating table and hammers out a ceasefire.
Now, the president also tossed in adding the same sanctions regime to Iran. Do you also support that, Senator Cotton?
Sure, why not? As you know, I'm always in favor of throwing the kitchen sink at Iran. They've been menacing the United States and our friends for now 46 years since the revolution. And in the first term, the president had what he called a maximum pressure campaign, and that brought Iran very nearly to its knees by the end of his first term. Unfortunately, Joe Biden gave them a hand and lifted them off the mat, and you saw where that brought us, to Iran on the brink of having a nuclear breakout earlier this year, until the United States and Israel together in a model of allied cooperation destroyed their nuclear program. But I think, again, if we want to continue to keep the pressure on Iran to pull in its horns, to not just cease with its nuclear ambitions, but to stop the support for terrorism that have killed so many Americans over the last 46 years, new sanctions would always be welcome.
That's 2 out of 4 of the Alliance of Tyrants, which would also include China and North Korea, maybe even Venezuela. So let me go to Venezuela. That's quite an armada that is assembled in the Caribbean and on the Atlantic coast of Venezuela, Senator. Do you actually expect military kinetic action, or is this a way of bringing pressure, in your view, on the dictator Maduro?
Well, Hugh, much of the military presence that we've built up in the Caribbean is directed towards these drug boats that the administration has done a great job of identifying and destroying. And that's the one way to keep these drugs off of our shores. Interdicting these boats is simply not a satisfactory solution. One, it's very dangerous for our soldiers, for our sailors, for Coast Guardsmen, as we've seen in the past, with interdictions off the coast of Somalia that led to the death of several sailors, I think just last year, maybe 2 years ago. And two, it's just something that these cartels build into their business model. Losing a boat to arrest doesn't really do anything to affect supply or prices in America. But as I heard Secretary Rubio say recently, there sure are a lot of people less willing to run these boats now lately than there were a year ago. So a lot of the military presence we have in the Caribbean is supporting the destruction of these drug boats in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific, helping to identify which boats are which. And I'm very, very confident that right now the administration is pitching a perfect game on that front. One, I've been in the briefings as the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, senior member of the Armed Services Committee. But two, Hugh, we can just use our common sense. If any of these boats had been filled with fishermen or refugees, CNN International would have already been down there, like interviewing their families for an international expose. But you also have to be prepared for contingencies. These drug cartels work in concert with the illegitimate Maduro regime in Venezuela, and you never quite know what they might do. So, of course, we have to have the assets in place to defend everyone who's conducting these operations.
Does it worry you that our use of force against Venezuela and the Cuban security forces that prop them up, and maybe even the Iranian Revolutionary Guards that prop them up, does that in any way entitle China to be more aggressive against Taiwan?
China may use that to justify any action against Taiwan, but they would already use a whole litany of American actions to justify it. I'm reminded of what Bill Buckley used to famously say during the Cold War to leftists and fellow travelers with communist Russia, said about people who drew such moral equivalence. It's the difference between a man who shoves an old lady in front of a bus and a man who shoves an old lady out from in front of an oncoming bus, to say that both of them go around shoving old ladies. You always have to look not just to the use of military force, but to the purpose and the ends of it. And the United States used military force, obviously, for sound, noble, just purposes. And communist China, just like communist Russia, uses it for evil, underhanded purposes.
Now, Senator, has the world gotten sufficiently clear that we can say there's a West that is led by the United States, and there's an anti-West, the Alliance of Tyrants, that is led by the CCP and Xi Jinping? Do you think the clarity is there for most people? You got to pick a side now.
I do, Hugh. I think probably it's much more commonplace on the left internationally than it is in America. You still have in America people like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and a distressing number of Democrats in growing numbers in the House and the Senate who are part of the Blame America First coalition and always seek to put the world's ills on America's shoulders. But I think if you just look internationally, I mean, you have plenty of center-left governments in Europe who very clearly state that the United States is the leader of the free world. We're the only country that can marshal a coalition of countries from Europe to the Middle East to Asia to stand up to Chinese communist tyranny. There are some voices in America on the left. Some of those are I would say, former left of center types, oftentimes in business or the tech world. But if you just look what our friends and allies around the world say, you can see how critical they know that leadership under President Trump has been.
I want to remind everyone, as Christmas approaches and Black Friday, 7 Things You Can't Say About China is Senator Cotton's bestseller. It's a perfect Christmas present. Boy, is it going to be very relevant in 2026. Senator Tom Cotton, thank you for joining me. Don't go anywhere, America. When I come back, more from Dividend Cafe, more from the president. I got one more cut from the president last night that I want to play for you as well. I've been playing you clips from David Bonson's podcast over the weekend, Dividend Cafe. David is on this program often. He's on National Review often. Great conservative commentator, great free market investment advisor for many people. Not me. I'm not his client. He's not my client, but I do follow him. Here's what David had to say on the Dividend Cafe this weekend about what worries him the most about AI companies. Cut number 15.
What is it that I'm worried about? Well, first of all, let's just understand the premise behind the whole AI story. Number one is that the hyperscalers are spending so much money on their AI capability build out that regardless of how it works out for them, there's just massive profits coming to the people they're spending the money with. Fair enough. The capital expenditures of some companies are the income for another. However, the problem, of course, with that is it presupposes that the money will continue going, even if things go poorly for the spender, to the company receiving the money. They most certainly will not. And then the companies that slow down in their spending or cease their spending have the leverage over the company whose high valuation, which is predicated on ongoing massive revenue growth, falls apart. So you do not end up with there's a winner and a loser. You end up with two losers in that situation. But the second premise as to why people are in the AI trade, besides their willingness to just buy people building out AI and not worry about the people spending the money on the build out, the second premise is that the people investing in AI are going to make so much money once they convert this newfound computing power they're investing into in real life application. And they don't know how they're going to do it, and they don't know when, but it's worth going along for the ride because there's these huge new profits coming from AI application utility. Now, if you find me sharing these two value creation paths as something alluring to you or tempting, then you are not hearing me correctly. There is unbelievable risk and unbelievable speculation involved in both of these stories. The build out part of AI is where everyone's focus is right now. We've talked about it before. Many analysts call this the picks and shovels phase. AI is at ground zero of AI infrastructure. They make the chips to make it go, and so forth and so on. But at some point, that does have to lead to usage and application. And I think most people understand that, unless you are one of those few that are timing an exit. Now, for this to not need an exit, but to go into a transformative moment, we have to look at history. Tell me something that has ever gone from a massive craze of build out to a utility and application phase without a huge, fatal purging of dead weight from that excess along the way. You can look historically at railroads, at telecom, at my own beloved fracking and shale story of 10 to 15 years ago. Radio, fiber optics, media. Okay, these things become legitimate stories that have transformative impact on society. That along the way, the build out phase goes to excess phase, and a lot of people get their faces ripped off. And
I pause right there. He had me at railroads because I've studied the railroad boom in the 1850s and 1860s. Everybody built railroads. Very few people made money, but those few people made a lot of money. It was a bubble, the railroad bubble. It doesn't mean that the railroads weren't worth good things. They were. They made a lot of money. One more cut from David, cut number 17.
I am not suggesting that this entire situation is totally analogous to pets.com because, as I said before, I do not think it is. I think the tech companies of today are higher quality businesses than many of those tech companies of the year 2000. But that doesn't change the fact that you need revenue growth rates, not just revenues, but the growth rates of the revenues to continue accelerating to rationalize this whole deal. And I simply do not believe they will. I believe.
Okay, that's it. That's his premise. I wanted you to hear it. I also want you to hear me taking my second relief factor of the day because I had the 1-year-old for the overnight on Saturday night, and fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I love our grandbabies and love acting like we were 30 years old when playing with them and lifting them and taking them around, but we're not. And that's when you need relief factor. So I'm taking twice what I normally do because with a little bit of stress that I'm good for trundling for a long time. That doesn't engage the lower back muscles like the other thing, doesn't engage the neck or the shoulder. Toddlers are like an all-purpose workout, and this one isn't really a toddler. I didn't have to lurch or anything like that, but they're pretty dead weight when they're asleep. So I recommend 1-800, the number 4, the word relief, or go visit relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Get the starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or relieffactor.com. You'll thank me. Victorina Mattis is the co-host of the Getting Hammered podcast. They had a great new edition recently. I hope they have a couple during the holidays. He is also the weekend editor and the arts and culture editor of the Washington Free Beacon. You can follow him at X, at Victorino Mattis. Now, Vic, you're a news guy. Do you like breaking news as much as I do?
I kind of dread breaking news, Hugh. I have to tell you, when I started at the Weekly Standard many, many years ago, I remember after the 1996 election and Bob Dole got trounced, and I thought to myself, man, it's going to get really boring, and I can't see anything happening after that. And then, of course, the Lewinsky scandal happened, and then, of course, the closest election ever, and then there was 9/11 and Afghanistan, Iraq, and it's been, ever since then, now it's been nonstop. And this particular second term of Trump, there was no quiet summer. Every day it's breaking news.
Well, I've got breaking news for you, Vic. You're sitting down.
Give it to me.
Care of Mary Kay Cabot of the Cleveland.com sports page. Cleveland Browns Shedeur Sanders is expected to start Sunday's game in Las Vegas with Dylan Gabriel in the concussion protocol. Barring something unexpected, Sanders will make his starting debut, becoming the 42nd Browns starter since the team returned in 1999. So that's breaking news, isn't it?
Yes, it's very exciting. When people talk about how to define eternity, I think it was waiting for Shedeur Sanders to finally get the call and figure out where he was going to go pro. That felt like eternity, but good for him. I wish him luck. And, of course, wishing, Bernie Kosar luck, too. He pulled through that surgery today.
He's out of surgery, and it's looking good. Now let's get to the thing I wanted to talk to you the most about, the turkey countdown. We are 10 days away from Thanksgiving. Vic, you are a cook and a drink artist. How do you make your turkey?
Okay, so here's a true confession. And I do a lot of cooking. I cook a lot at home, and I roast chickens. I have yet to roast my own turkey because we've never had the Thanksgiving at our house. It's always been at the in-laws or my parents, one or the other. And God bless them that, that's always been the case. And now we go down the street to my cousins where they do both a regular roast turkey and a fried turkey. And I have to tell you, I enjoy a mouth-watering, crispy fried turkey that takes maybe 45 minutes at most. You do it outside. My brother-in-law, Bill Dwyer, is a fire marshal, so he supervises it, out on the grass. You never want to do it on the deck. I do make sides. I can make great mashed potatoes. And I am in charge, however, Hugh, of the beverages, and I always make a pitcher of Manhattans. And that is
all right. Now that is second on my list is how to do the turkey. And you've given us two options, and you have indicated a preference for the grilled turkey. I don't like that, but to each their own. Then I wanted to know, since you're the author of Vodka, what are the drinks that go? I don't drink, so what is the drink that goes best with turkey?
Well, great question, Hugh. After Labor Day, we tend to switch to the brown spirits. And so what we're liking to do, for example, for Thanksgiving and for Christmas, if you're not doing a martini, you're doing it for a large crowd, make a batch of Manhattans. And I'll tell you the secret. It's not much of a secret. 40 ounces of bourbon, 20 ounces of sweet vermouth, and 40 drops of bitters. any bitters of your choice, walnut bitters, dark chocolate bitters, regular bitters, and stir that up, and that's a party ready to happen. You just pour it over rocks, put a little bit of a cherry garnish with just a little bit of that cherry juice. You're good to go.
Now, Vic, walk me through that again. First, the recipe, and then why it works. Because this is all alien to me. If I have anything, I have a single malt scotch every 4 or 5 years. So I'm just not a drinker. Why does this work?
Well, first of all, you have the cherries and you have the bitters and the vermouth. That kind of wonderfully disguises the power and the potency of the whiskey or the rye if you're using that. And people are out there to have a good time. Again, remember, don't drink and drive. But, people think that they're going to need a lot to cover them for Thanksgiving. I'd say after 2 or 3 of my Manhattans, you're pretty good to go. And it does pair very nicely with turkey and all the sides. You get started early. And again, the ratio for me in a pitcher is 40, 20, 40. That's 40 ounces of the bourbon or the rye. If you like a little bit of spice, then the 20 ounces of sweet vermouth, like a Dolan, and then 40 drops of whatever your favorite bitters are, and you're ready to have a party. Again, on the rocks, you need to dilute it somewhat there. Let's not get too crazy. And real cherries.
Do you recommend a particular brand of bourbon, and what is the difference between bourbon and rye? I ask for the Steelers fans and myself.
Oh, sure. Well, the difference between bourbon and rye is where it's distilled from. Bourbons generally come from, wheat, corn, and rye, comes from rye. So you'll definitely have a spicier flavor, a spicier profile for that. And there's a huge boom in rye whiskey right now. People are rediscovering it. It's something that goes back to, our colonial past, so that's very exciting. But that's what I recommend. Do I have a particular brand preference? Normally, when you're mixing them all together, if you do it well, doesn't really matter. You don't really need the most expensive stuff. No, nothing plastic, okay? Come on now. It's a family occasion. Nothing that bounces on the ground, Yeah.
We used to take my grandpa, who lived 101, old granddad, and we thought it was cute. But in fact, it was because it was cheap. Let me finish by talking about dishes. What I specialize in at Thanksgiving is doing dishes. Do you have a job around the house since you don't actually do the turkey?
Well, again, I'd like to remind everybody I do most of the drinks, so I provide the spirits, making sure everybody is taken care of, and then I try to avoid the dishes. Are really the worst part, aren't they? I don't know if you have a choice between cooking and cleaning. I always say cook. So I'm out there. I'll whip up
I always clean. No. Vic, I can be alone in the kitchen and I can organize. I just don't want any help. Last question: do you like Thanksgiving? Love Thanksgiving or tolerate Thanksgiving?
I absolutely adore Thanksgiving. I have the fondest memories. A lot of it is because you think about your family memories. We never had, crazy, bad, divisive Thanksgivings like you hear some stories about a lot of families, unfortunately, and arguments. Everybody generally agreed on the same things. My late mother, God bless her, used to make a famous French stuffing with chestnuts and roast pork and celery. I miss that very much. It's a great stuffing. It's French. Look it up.
Vic, my mother was a wonderful nurse and a terrible cook, and I never had warm turkey in my life. So I like getting together. I love the family time, but turkey doesn't do it for me. Vic Mattis, thank you. Have a great. We'll be back a little more Thanksgiving before Thanksgiving. This is our warm-up edition. Follow him on X at Victorina Mattis. Some of you over at the Universe are wondering, what is this podcast I'm playing? It's called The Dividend Cafe. You're familiar with David Bahnsen. David is a guest on my show frequently. He's been my friend for 30 years. And I am neither his client nor is he my client. We're just friends and spent a lot of time together. He's left Orange County for New York City. I've left Orange County for the Beltway. But we still talk, and he's a brilliant man. I want to play again cut number 17 of David's caution about the AI bubble, because I think it is so timely. Cut number 17.
I am not suggesting that this entire situation is totally analogous to pets.com, because as I said before, I do not think it is. I think the tech companies of today are higher quality businesses than many of those tech companies of the year 2000. But that doesn't change the fact that you need revenue growth rates, not just revenues, but the growth rates of the revenues to continue accelerating to rationalize this whole deal. And I simply do not believe they will. I believe that the revenues will continue to grow, but the growth rates will decelerate at a time that CapEx, as a percentage of revenue, is flying higher. That CapEx as a percentage of revenue will be going higher while revenue growth itself is declining. And I do not believe that risk and fundamental economic clarity is appreciated by enough investors. So there is a not everyone can win dynamic. There is China global competitiveness dynamic. There is the investor base behind the story represents, I think, a vulnerability behind it. And there is just the basic reality and inevitability of revenue growth deceleration, all attached to investment thesis that are themselves vulnerable, which is that the picks and shovels are enough, or that the utility is all going to come out fine, even if I don't really know how. You got vulnerabilities sitting on top of vulnerabilities, trading at 50 times, 60 times earnings. It can go a lot higher, my friends. It can go lower. Maybe that level 2 weeks ago at Palantir and NVIDIA at all-time highs, maybe that will prove to be a generational top. And these things, the weakness we've seen in this story the last week or two is just the beginning. Maybe it's just a little dip and it's about to soar higher yet again. I don't know. But I do know that when the rest of the world buys into euphoria, the notion of being covetous of their short-term results generally is a very bad idea.
I think that last bit, being covetous of the short-term results of someone who, bought Palantir at 5 and held on to it and sold it last week at 200, is a very dangerous dynamic. And when the Wall Street Journal, all serendipitous, it was just a cover story of the Wall Street Journal I read, and there's my friend David Bahnsen being quoted. And then that led me down the trail to listen to the Dividend Cafe and then to read it and then to share it with you, because I think it's a word of caution well received at a timely time. You might thank me down the road. I believe that most of my audience, and I've learned this over 35 years in broadcast, most of the people who listen or watch me do so because over time they've come to either trust my judgment or at least my story selection. So that when I get really interested in something, I assume they're going to be, for the most part, really interested in what I'm really interested in. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to continue a broadcast career for very long. If you went on frolics and detours, as we say in tort law, about stuff that had absolutely zero interest to the general audience, you wouldn't be on the air. I've been doing this for 35 years, so I trust my instincts. When on Saturday, and I'm reviewing a bit for those of you who've been along for a little bit, but I'm also saying this for those who just joined, got in their car, commuting home. On Saturday morning, I sat down with the Wall Street Journal and began reading a story on how Friday's rally had saved a very, very bad week on Wall Street. And it had been a very, very bad week on Wall Street. And there I saw my friend David Bahnsen quoted. And I'm not used to seeing my friends quoted on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And David Bahnsen is the founder and name behind the Bahnsen Group. He is the proprietor of DividendCafe.com, an investment podcast and newsletter. David's a really smart guy when it comes to markets and money. Really a very smart guy. Also a great Christian man, wonderful author, extraordinary personality. I've known him for 30 years. He's never been my client. I've never been his client. He's been on the show many times over 25 years, but I hadn't seen him quoted in the Wall Street Journal before. So I read into the story, and David was warning about the AI bubble. And I sent him a note. Actually, I posted on X. Hey, this is interesting. David Bahnsen, I know him, and he said this. David sent me a direct message, and he said, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Here's a link to the Dividend Cafe podcast that's a longer explanation of my point of view on the AI bubble. And I listened to it. Then I printed it off, and I read it, and then I sent it to my kids all on Saturday. And I thought to myself, I'm going to get permission I have from David to play you from some clips, because I think it's a very good word of caution about artificial intelligence and investing. And I have one more clip to play for you. It is cut number 16 from the most recent Dividend Cafe hosted by David Bahnsen. Cut number 16, please.
I don't know that that's going to hold. I don't know that this will stay an equity-funded situation. Oracle's certainly borrowing a lot more money than some of the other players that we've talked about. You know, you do have these hyperscalers that print money in their core business. They are free cash flow generating machines like the world's never seen when you look at Meta, Google, Microsoft, Apple. These are just insane cash flow generating companies. Have the ability to lose a lot of money in equity without it going into something debt. They have unlevered balance sheets. But there's a lot of questions about what the capital structure of AI things are going to be. There's a lot of questions about counterparties. There's a lot of questions about tri-party situations. I've talked about various economic transactions taking on a circular nature. But there's also a question of how any of it's going to happen at all without a build out of power that will be debt funded, that will be debt fueled. And so I don't think anyone knows enough to know where some of those other adjacent risks are going to come. What I would say to kind of leave you a couple quick concerns as I finish my case for this being a bubble and then want to conclude finally with the practical reason that we're handling it the way we're handling it. Number one, I believe that there's an awful lot of this whole story tied around a private company that no one knows anything about, that is at the hub of a lot of issues as a buyer, as a seller, as an acquirer, as an acquiree, as a funder, this OpenAI company that makes ChatGPT. I have never in my life seen a private company with no real balance sheet per se be able to attract absolutely infinite amounts of speculative venture capital, equity capital, and be a part of counterparty to transactions of this magnitude of trillions of dollars. It's absolutely unbelievable. Maybe they just end up owning the universe. But you know, a lot of people seem to be missing the fact that the amount of CapEx going into AI right now, you cannot have everybody win. The amount of money spent would require everyone to win, but they can't all win. One of these players has to beat out another player. You're going to have failures. You have to. And I think that that represents a huge unknown, unforeseen, undiscounted risk that there will, in a maybe best case scenario and an optimistic scenario, be some companies in the AI story that win, but that comes with others losing. And unless an investor is picking the winners and avoiding the losers, which represents a level of risk I very much doubt they are aware of, I think there's going to be significantly more carnage than people realize. I would like to add, I do not believe that we understand the risk of China in this. Now, perhaps the U.S., which is certainly winning in the AI story so far, stays in the lead forever and ever. Amen. I do not think China has better tools and applications than we have in the U.S. I do believe they're trying. And I do believe that certain recent history examples of people laughing at the idea of U.S. losing supremacy to a global competitor might want to go look at Intel's success in chips and semiconductors versus Taiwan Semiconductor and decide who's laughing now. Is it totally out of the question that there is some degree of risk from global competitors? NVIDIA does 40% of their business in recent quarters with countries like Malaysia, Taiwan, in Singapore. Is it really out of the question that they're obviously selling their power to global competitors? I simply don't accept that there's no risk that American presumed dominance is vulnerable. I do not say that as the base case, but I do say it as a risk that needs to be factored in when you start talking about these valuations and this level of euphoria, and I don't think it's being factored in. I also would add that I think an awful lot of people, both professionals and novices, involved in this story right now that are most bullish and euphoric on AI, they were not alive as professional investors or grown-up investors in 1997, 1998, 1999, into the 2000 bust, that there isn't the same degree of memory, of familiarity, of understanding, of risk appreciation, of humility that might be appropriate given these certain circumstances. Now,
Humility is the word I wanted you to hear. David is not a bear. He is not shorted stocks. He is not someone who plays the market. He is a very traditional diversification. Own some real estate, own some stocks, own some bonds, have some cash, have some precious metals. He is mostly a dividend guy. I don't actually know what his model portfolio is because I've never asked him. But I talk to him about investments in markets frequently enough to know that the Dividend Cafe believes in sort of Warren Buffett approach to investing. Find good stocks, hold on to them for a very long time. And this whole first segment is for my younger demo. And there's a lot out there. People who are under 50, people who are under 40, people who are under 30. Investment isn't gambling. Gambling is addictive and dumb. Investment is taking care of yourself and your family and your kids for the long run, and it involves a certain amount of caution and prudence. And you don't get rich quick. The wonderful magic of compound interest is that 7% is the rule of 7. If you can hit 7%, it doubles in 7 years. But if you hit 4% every year, you're going to be fine. And if you buy the market, it's not very sexy, but you're not going to get killed over 30, 40 years. I am most afraid, and I talked to David about this on direct messages, about people who have not adjusted their risk aversion or their risk capacity for their age. They can't be burned again. I went through Black Tuesday, I think, 1988, 87, 87. I was in the federal government. I remember watching it thinking, the world's coming to an end. But when you're 30 years old, you don't worry about it. Then I went into the practice of law just in time for the first real estate recession that I had to endure, 1989, 1990, 1991. Then went through the dot-com bubble when a lot of my law partners were in the corporate world and they just sat idle for a long time. Then you don't ever want to do 2008. Whether you're a little investor or a regular investor, it was awful. It was a panic. It was a nightmare. And now another bubble. And what David Bahnsen is preaching, what I am endorsing, is prudence. Don't sell anything tomorrow because you're David Bahnsen today. Be aware of risk. Invest like a grown-up. It's not gambling. That's what I'm telling you. It's not gambling. If you're a Robin Hood rookie and you've made some money, take it off the table. Maybe. Or maybe not. I just wanted you to hear that point of view. Coming right back with Alex Gray to talk about bigger things like war. Alex Gray is the CEO of American Global Strategies, one of the country's leading consultants on the global scene. Alex served as chief of staff to the National Security Council in the first term of President Trump, and he joins me now. Alex, let's begin, if we can, where I left off with Senator Cotton. How do you assess the American Armada off of Venezuela, both coasts, I think, of Venezuela?
Well, Hugh, I think it's multifaceted. I think, on the one hand, the president has been saying since very early in his administration, actually during his transition, he's been saying that we're recentering our foreign policy on the Western Hemisphere. This is something I saw with him my whole time at the White House, where as someone who has a natural sense of place and location, given his background in real estate, he has been uniquely interested in our neighborhood, our near abroad, since his first term. And he's always been baffled that, one, China and Russia have intruded repeatedly into our hemisphere with almost no response from American presidents. And he's been shocked at the ability of narco traffickers like Maduro. And I say that intentionally, Hugh. He is a narco trafficker. He is inseparable from narco trafficking. His regime is a narco trafficking regime. Maduro's ability to bring narcotics into the United States and kill Americans has always baffled the president, in that there's never been a serious American response. So this is twofold. One is to do exactly what he's been doing directly with these strikes on the cigarette boats, which is to interdict drug traffickers that are coming into the United States to kill Americans. And the second is coercive Teddy Roosevelt carry a big stick approach to try and change Maduro's behavior. And I think best case to compel Maduro to leave power and to make some sort of change in the regime's complicity in narco trafficking in the Caribbean that floods our streets.
So, Alex Gray, do you believe that the president would need authorization from Congress to launch kinetic activity directed at the Maduro regime? I do not, but I just want to see what you think.
Yeah, I don't think he does, Hugh. I think he fully is within his inherent powers as commander in chief to use force to prevent Americans from being killed by, as I said, a regime that is a narco trafficking regime. I think the president is every bit within his full inherent commander-in-chief authorities to launch whatever strikes he deems necessary to prevent the Maduro regime from doing two things. One, collaborating with our adversaries, which he has been doing with Beijing and Moscow consistently, and two, to flood our streets with narcotics. I think the president's fully within his power to make whatever militarily appropriate actions he deems necessary in what I would consider self-defense.
Now, Alex Gray, can you walk me through sort of a degree of difficulty? When divers dive in the Olympics, the judges assign a degree of difficulty for the execution of what they're attempting to do. When we invaded Afghanistan, that was a degree of difficulty that was off the charts because we had no access to any base. We had the Marines deploying from ships thousands of miles away. It was very, very difficult to do. How difficult is Venezuela compared to Afghanistan if you want to accomplish the same sort of result that was accomplished in Panama by George H.W. Bush in the 1990-91 timeframe?
Yeah, well, Hugh, if we're to make a comparison to that era of American history, I would compare the Venezuelan military to Saddam Hussein's army in the first Gulf War. This is a military that's essentially Soviet, that's bloated, that on paper looks like it has a lot more capacity and capability than it really does. And I would refer you to a comment. I was giving remarks at the Atlantic Council last week alongside General Laura Richardson, who had been I guess, second to most recent commander of U.S. Southern Command. And General Richardson made the comment that essentially the Venezuelan military is operating with Soviet kit that hasn't been refurbished for decades, and it's primarily about the protection of the regime and Maduro himself, it's not a national army in the sense that we think of a national army that can do more than menace its neighbors, traffic narcotics, and protect the regime's leadership. So I think if we were to go in with a very narrowly targeted objective, which I think is what the president would do, this is not about democracy promotion. This is not about some sort of attempt to change the Venezuelans' way of life. The goal here will be to remove a narco kingpin like Noriega in 1989, and it would be to do so in a way that showed the Chinese and the Russians that they can no longer have a strategic foothold in our hemisphere, and they can no longer be complicit with a regime that's trying to kill Americans with narcotics. I think the president could do it strategically and surgically, and I think that the Venezuelan military the goal would not be to fight the United States. The goal would be to preserve the Maduro regime, both Maduro himself and the people directly around him. And I think that a Marine Expeditionary Unit with some special operations forces and air cover would probably be able to execute that with pretty short order.
Now, Alex, I like to remind people that even Grenada, which people don't remember and often mock, cost almost 24 American lives. Yeah. And the lives of a lot of people on the island. They're very dangerous no matter what you do. So we're talking about putting Americans into harm's way. Does it matter that Colombia is no longer our friend? Does it matter that Latin America that there's chaos in Mexico as we speak, which we also should talk about in 2 minutes? It seems like the hemisphere is kind of moving around in ways that were unpredictable and we do not like.
Yeah, well, the hemisphere is absolutely moving in unpredictable ways. I would argue, Hugh, that we're actually seeing some positive developments. We saw a right-of-center leader elected in Ecuador. I think we're going to see a right-of-center leader elected in Peru later next year. We're probably going to see
happened in Chile yesterday. Yep. Chile was good
Absolutely.
yesterday.
Absolutely. Brazil is unpredictable. Bolivia was a positive result recently. So I think we're seeing, Latin America is cyclical in how it changes in these elections. When Trump first came into office, it was primarily right of center. It has switched back and forth. I think we're headed in the right direction now. The Colombians could be a problem. I don't think they will be because I think that they understand, again, that is not a good bet for even a Marxist guerrilla who is currently running the government of Colombia. That's not a good bet for them, and that's not a side they want to be on. I think the president has, again, you're right to caution, Hugh, that any of these actions have unintended consequences. We went into Iraq with far too few people in Washington thinking about what those unintended consequences could be. I think we've learned a lot of those lessons, and we're much more humble about the use of force as a country than we were 20 years ago. But I think if the president were to give the order that that the military needs to go in and to execute a surgical operation, I think that from a technical perspective, I think the president would have a great chance of success in executing that order with relatively, and I emphasize relatively, with relatively contained damage.
Alex Gray, it's always good to talk to you. You always bring a lot of perspective to this, and I appreciate it. The CEO of American Global Strategies, one of the smartest people I know on matters of this, having served as Chief of Staff of the National Security Council when Ambassador Robert O'Brien was the NSC. Ambassador O'Brien, of course, Chairman of American Global Security. I spent a lot of the program today talking about David Bahnsen of the Bahnsen Group's podcast, The Dividend Cafe, that made the Wall Street Journal and caught my eye, and that's macroeconomics, that's AI bubbles, that's markets. Let me talk about you saving some money yourself. Fetching Mrs. You and I did that today. Saved about $100 a month today because we went to, they're not a sponsor, by the way. We went to Chapter Medicare. I don't even remember what the website is, but they advertised on the show a long time ago. And it turns out we're not in the best plan D or the best plan G. And big data can save you money. So you try and save money when you can. $80 a month, $100 a month, that's real money. And Medicare people have open season. Take advantage. Find someone who knows what they're doing. And Chapter does. But I also want you to think about consumer cellular, because especially if you're over 50, you're almost certainly paying too much for the data you get on your phone. Consumercellular.com/Hugh. Consumercellular.com/Hugh. Remember my code, Hugh25, because that'll save you an additional $25, $5 a month off of each of your first 5 invoices. Or you can call 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. A lot of Americans, and especially people over 50, pay way too much for unlimited cell service. They do it because they don't want to get stung by by an unexpected charge and a hidden cost. But you don't have to. You can get unlimited data plans, for example, with Consumer Cellular. 2 lines, unlimited data. If you're over 50, $60 a month. Can't be beat. 1-800-411-4454. But no matter what your age is, give them a call and find out if they can save you money. Keep your number, keep your data, keep all your contacts. That's easy enough to do. Takes about 20 minutes to switch cell providers. And Big Cell doesn't want you to ask, and ConsumerCellular.com wants you to save money. Also want to talk about banking. Now, this is political. Second sponsor. Americans for Free Markets. That's my sponsor. Their website is forfreemarkets.org. F-O-R freemarkets.org. Forfreemarkets.org. They are on the crusade to make sure that debanking never comes back. You know, we had debanking under President Obama, where the regulators leaned on banks to just shut down the banking services offered to disfavored causes and people. Went away under the first President Trump term, came back under President Biden. And there were a lot of ways. There was a lot of sleight of hand that regulators can use to disfavor causes, people. Usually they go after guns. People like the NRA, people like that. They try and oblige you to not provide banking services in a free market. It's crazy. It's bad for the bank. It's bad for the customer. Bad for the marketplace. forfreemarkets.org. forfreemarkets.org. Go and get involved and make sure that Congress follows up the president's executive order with a statute that says never again. If it's not criminal activity, it's not our business. Finally, Relief Factor. I've taken it twice today. I don't take it 3 times a day because my back's not that bad. Did have the baby, the 1-year-old, wonderful weekend. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt did most of the work, of course. But I did my share of picking up and putting down. Not a toddler, a swiveler. All right? That baby could swivel. And that baby is not that heavy compared to Tree Trunk Teddy on Halloween. He didn't throw my back out the way Tree Trunk Teddy did. But it's still a toddler, and it's still stuff I'm not used to. It's not trundling. It's not walking. It's not stairs. It's not workouts with weights. It's a swiveler. It's a baby. And that did tweak the back a little bit, so I'm doubling down on Relief Factor for a few days because it really does work. You can get a 3-week starter pack from Relief Factor for $19.95. Do the math, Steelers fans. That's less than $1 a day by calling 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or visiting their website and find that starter pack there as well at relieffactor.com. Again, our best wishes and prayers go out to Bernie Kosar, quarterback extraordinaire. Great man of Boardman, Ohio, and Cleveland and the Browns. Had a liver transplant today. Sure doesn't feel good, but prayers for his quick and rapid recovery. Everybody in northeastern Ohio rooting for him. And we're rooting for Shedeur Sanders. I think it's our 42nd quarterback since the Browns came back in 1999. 42 in 26 years. That's not good. That's different from other teams. But maybe Shedeur, he's got Dylan Gabriel's in the concussion protocol. Shedeur Sanders is going to take the first team snaps. He's going to go the full distance. If he can earn the job and keep the job, I'll be the happiest man in America, and we can use our first-round draft choices on an O-line and a receiver for him. We shall see. 75 segments a week I do, and during college football season, I devote 2 of them to talking about college football with Doug Lesmerises. He is the co-host of the Bill and Doug Show, which you can find on Substack. I linked it in my X file. And on Mondays, we do magic and misery because there's always some magic on the football weekend. There's always some misery. Doug, take it away. Who's got the magic? Who's got the tears?
I got a lot of magic, Hugh. This is that time of year for college football. Listen to this magic. Number 1, Oklahoma against number 4 Alabama on Saturday. They got outgained by almost 200 yards, but Alabama turned it over 3 times. Turnovers, Hugh. Oklahoma wins 23-21. Oklahoma now in very good position to make the college football playoff, and Bama should still be okay as long as they beat Auburn at the end of the year. Big one for Oklahoma.
Oh, really?
Big, like that's
okay.
Brent Venables, their head coach, was a little bit on the hot seat coming into the year, so that's a gigantic win for the Sooners. Okay. Texas A&M, one of 3 undefeated teams, got down 30-3 against South Carolina, came back and won 31-30. Hugh, so they remain undefeated. You don't see a lot of 27-point comebacks at any level of football, right? Michigan kicked a game-winning field goal in Wrigley Field to beat Northwestern on the last play of the game. I don't know if you saw it. The ball went out of the stadium.
I didn't.
He kicked it. It went like out on the street, I think. That's ball.
Wrigley, I didn't even know that they're building a new stadium at Northwestern, aren't they? That's why they're doing it. Okay.
Yeah, so Northwestern's, for the last 2 years, they've been playing some of their games in a temporary stadium on campus, but they play a couple games a year. Ohio State played at Wrigley last year against Northwestern, so Michigan played this week. Minnesota at Northwestern at Wrigley Field this coming Saturday. And then news from today, Hugh, Virginia Tech just hired James Franklin, the fired Penn State coach, who got fired in the middle of the year. Virginia Tech also fired its coach already this year. They have hired James Franklin. He's actually replacing Brent Pry, who used to work for James Franklin at Penn State. So anyway, it's a really good landing spot for James Franklin at Virginia Tech. They have a chance to jump up a level, I think, with him running the show there. And then let me give you one more. Let me give you an NFL magic a little bit. Josh Allen from the Buffalo Bills, 6 touchdowns. for the Buffalo Bills in a win over Tampa Bay. 3 passing, 3 running. That guy's crazy. And we've had some, like, they had a rough loss against Miami a couple weeks ago, but when Josh Allen's playing like that's as magical as you get in the NFL.
All right. Did you make a list of misery, or is it
Misery?
the holiday
Do you want
season and we're
misery?
not gonna? All right, we want misery.
Yeah. You know me. You know me. I deal in misery at times, Hugh. Texas. This is kind of it for Texas, and I'm going to rub it in on Texas. Preseason number 1. Lost to Georgia on Saturday. They're now 7-3, almost certainly out of the playoff picture. They play their rival, Texas A&M, in 2 weeks. If they somehow would win that game, they would have an outside shot. But here's where it gets rubbed in. To Texas's credit, they've made the college football playoff semifinals each of the past 2 years. There's a chance this year that 4 of the 12 playoff teams could be from Texas. Texas A&M, Texas Tech, North Texas, who has the small school inside track now, and maybe SMU out of the ACC. If there are 4 playoff teams from Texas, and Texas, the flagship university, is not one of them, that is not going to go over very well in Austin, right? Yeah. And then one more misery from the NFL, Q. Kansas City Chiefs lost to Denver. They're 5-5. And they are in danger of missing the playoffs. Patrick Mahomes, the defining player of this generation of the NFL, has been the starting quarterback for 7 years for the Kansas City Chiefs. Made the playoffs every year, made the Super Bowl 5 out of 7, won 3 of those 5 Super Bowls. They might not make it. So they got some winning to do between now and the end of the season. 5-5, they're still okay, but they got a fight on their hands.
Does anyone ever say, Andy Reid, maybe it's time you thought about bringing in a new offensive coordinator? Is there anything around Reid, the rumbles?
He's still the guy. He's the man with the play sheet. He's got, like, his offensive coordinator once upon a time, Matt Nagy, went to be a head coach with the Chicago Bears, didn't work out there. Now he's back. So the Mahomes and Reid combination, I think, is here for the long haul. But it's just Patrick Mahomes, as great as he is, he's been slightly off this year. But I got a little magic in. Yeah.
I got to ask you about James Franklin, because I always thought the poor guy was tortured by Ohio State. Are we accelerating the coaching carousel? Is this moving faster than it's ever moved before, and why?
Desperation, big stakes, big money, desperation. And I do think it'd be good if college football tried to do something about it. For instance, what's happening right now is Ole Miss, which is almost certainly going to make the playoff with Lane Kiffin as its head coach. Both Florida and LSU fired their head coaches. Both of them want Lane Kiffin. Reports that this weekend Lane Kiffin's family was visiting both the University of Florida and LSU to see what's up, while Ole Miss is still playing its season and trying to make the playoff. He wasn't with them, but the family was. I wish they could do something, Hugh, to just let the seasons play out, say you can't hire a head coach until a certain time, because everything's accelerated, because winning is so important to the bottom line financially, and people think it's all about the head coach. In a lot of ways it is. They get desperate.
What's so weird about that? The analog to the world of politics is when there's a Supreme Court vacancy, you have to sneak the would-be justices in for interviews. They watch their flight paths. They have to run them through the backyards of neighbors. Now we're watching coaches' families? That's pretty bizarre.
Flight Tracker, man. Flight Tracker. There's nothing college football reporters like more than Flight Tracker. Oh, was there a flight out of Ole Miss? Did it go to Gainesville? Oh, was there a flight that went to Baton Rouge? Let's see what's going on. And then listen, the boosters, the donors, they want to put out there to their fan bases that, hey, we're doing everything we can. We're trying to get this guy. And meanwhile, it creates an impossible situation where your team's trying to win, but you're making a decision about your future. So it's it's not necessarily the coach's fault, but man, I wish we could hire it a different way. You know what I mean? Like
30-second exit. 30-second exit, Doug. UCLA, I watched the game on Saturday night.
Oh, yeah.
That should be a great program. We are listened to in LA and have been for 35 years. Can they fix UCLA?
Yes. There's a guy, the name that is out there is Bob Chesney, who's a lower level coach at James Madison. Kurt Signetti, the unbelievably successful coach in Indiana, came from JMU. That's the name for people at UCLA. If they hire Bob Chesney, that's a great hire. And if Indiana can do it, UCLA can do it.
They sure can. They should be. The Bruins ought to be able to do it. Doug Lesmerises of the Bill and Doug Show. If you want the link to it, It's in my X account. You can follow Doug on X at Doug LeMarie as well. And the Bill and Doug Show, osu.substack.com, and the podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Sometimes I save myself a clip that Dwayne has found that I just want to react to. And this is cut number 9. It is former First Lady Michelle Obama on a podcast with Tracy Ross Ellis, Diana Ross's daughter, successful actress. I didn't know she had a podcast. And I don't know the context of the interview, but Dwayne thought I should hear it. Cut number 9.
Do you think that impacts the room that we've made for a woman to be president? Well, as we saw in this past election, sadly, we ain't ready. That's why I'm like, don't even look at me about running, because you all are lying. You're not ready for a woman. You are not. So don't waste my time. You know, we got a lot of growing up to do. And there's still, sadly, a lot of men who do not feel like they can be led by a woman, and we saw it. What was the question?
My immediate reaction, not having seen that before, is that First Lady Obama's husband stopped Hillary Clinton from getting the nomination in an election she almost certainly would have won when he had been in the Senate for 2 years, and she had been there much longer and had a great deal more experience. So in that case, the person who was not ready to let a woman win was her husband. The second thing I bring up is that her husband didn't want Kamala Harris to get the nomination. If we believe the reporting around the Biden withdrawal, President Obama did not want Vice President Harris to get the Democratic nomination. Now, as a conservative who believes that Margaret Thatcher is the greatest prime minister since Winston Churchill and that no one has equaled Margaret Thatcher since then, and as someone who worked for Lynn Cheney and Connie Horner and have absolutely no problem whatsoever voting for anyone, and someone who hopes Susan Collins wins handily in her re-election bid because she's a fabulous chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee, I think that's a crazy comment, an absolute out there comment. And I hope you play that tomorrow, Generalissimo, for Senator Talent when you tape Dwayne's World. Do you intend to play that for Senator Talent tomorrow?
I certainly plan to play it for James Lilacs as one of the 10 dumbest things said in
No,
the
I'm
week.
going to play it for Lilacs during the conversation tomorrow because, again, they took out Hillary and they didn't want Kamala. So that's just a little bit incongruous with the facts.
To me, she has fame, fortune, and the esteem of millions of people, right? The ingratitude that she just...
Well, I don't know if it's ingratitude. I just think it's not true. She's the one that stopped Hillary Clinton. I mean, her husband stopped Hillary Clinton.
She has a lot of things that a lot of people will never...
Well, of course,
ever
but
have.
I'm just saying, as a matter of political history, it ain't true.
On top of that, it's not true.
I would recommend everyone Dividend Cafe.